Good morning, Hartsville Pike family and friends. I want to share with you this morning a thought that has challenged my mind and convicted my heart for some time. That's the thought, the phrase, and yet he came. Jesus Christ was in a perfect place, and yet he willingly left that perfect place to come to this imperfect place. He left there a place where he was with the Father, he was with the angels, and he left their immediate presence to come here to be among imperfect people. He didn't come naive. He knew exactly what he would face. He knew everything that would happen to him, and yet he came. He knew the day would come in which the Father would say it's time, and he knew that would begin a journey of pain and suffering and rejection. And yet he came. He knew that he would leave a place of no temptation and be tempted, and yet he came. He left a place of no suffering, and yet he would come to see suffering and experience suffering, and yet he came. He left a place of no tears, no sorrow, and he knew he would weep and he would experience sorrow, and yet he came. He knew that he would feel the blows of the enemy upon his body, and yet he came. He knew that he would feel the spit of his enemy on his face, and yet he came. He knew that even the religious people wouldn't accept him, and yet he came. He came knowing that one of his 12 closest friends would deny him 3 times. He came knowing that one of his 12 closest friends would sell him out and betray him. And yet he came. He left heaven knowing there was a Calvary, that there would be a cross. And yet he came. He was not surprised at anything that happened. And yet he came. He knew what a crucifixion was. He knew that he would suffer the pain and the agony that no man has ever or ever will suffer. And yet he came. And it would be one thing if he came knowing that everyone who ever lived would accept his sacrifice, claim him as their Savior, and walk in his steps. But he came knowing that the majority would reject him. He even said while he was here on earth that there would be few and compared to the many that would find that narrow path and that would be willing to deny themselves, take up their cross, and to follow him. He knew that the minority of people who ever lived would accept him, and yet he still came and went through all that he did. And he came knowing that at times you and I would be embarrassed by him, that even you and I who wear his name would stand silently by while we hear his name blasphemed, that at times we may make a mockery of his sacrifice by the way we live, the things we say. He knew that even those of us who claim to love him would disappoint him and hurt him at times, and yet he came. And yet he came. And it's only because of that great love he had for you and I. I don't claim to fully understand it or comprehend it, but it's because of that love. I want you to think about that today. And yet he came because of that love for you. And because he does love you and went through all that he did for you, let's honor him by making it a wonderful day. God bless.